Hi, fourth grade friends. Orphan of Ellis Island. We're on day 2 of it. So first, before we go on, we need to find our packet, and we need to find our homework from yesterday, chapter 1 and 2 questions. So let's take a look through those. Remember, you needed to answer in complete quality sentences, and I made the cursive optional. So as long as they are complete quality sentences, it's okay if they're not cursive. So we had to think through who was the museum dedicated. And in chapter 1, it told us who it was dedicated to. Let's just look back. Dedicated to the millions of immigrants who passed through these buildings. So we might say the museum was dedicated to the millions of immigrants. Sorry, friends. Coming to America. Something along those lines. But do you have a capital letter and a period? Did you reuse part of your question in it? Remember, that's what we're looking at, those quality sentences. Make sure you got that 3 thumbs up. Capital letter, period, part of your question. 3 thumbs up, okay? So let's try the next one. What was Dominic Cantori thinking about during the tour? First one, we need to start with a capital letter and reuse part of our sentence. So Dominic Cantori was thinking about, what was he thinking about? Oh yeah, his feet. Remember? All he could think about was his feet and how tight and cramped they're in there. You might have added that onto your sentence too, about his feet being cramped in his shoes, or how his shoes were too small. Something that goes along with him thinking about his feet is fabulous. All right, let's look at that third one. When Dominic thought of family trees, what image came to his head? So this one I might change my answer a little bit. The image that came to Dominic's head was a branch with one leaf containing his name. So this time I didn't quite restate my question, but I got the main part of the question. The image that came to his head was, that linking verb, a branch with one leaf containing his name. All right. Who did he live and why? I think that one was saying, who did he live with and why? So Dominic lived with a foster family because his parents have died. Helping verb there, have died. Look at that. Grammar's all around us. So what is the one thing, the one he has from his parents? What does he have from his parents? The one thing he has from his parents is the golden key. You might have even said the golden key with the initials SC. Do you remember what the SC stands for? Dominic thinks it stands for Sal Cantori, which was his dad. How did the other kids treat him? Give an example of this treatment. So this one really should be at least 2 sentences. The other kids treated him kind of meanly. They laughed at Dominic when he got hurt, right? Might have also talked about how Justin, the red-haired boy, was kind of almost making fun of him, right? He was laughing with his friend. What did Dave say was the reason they picked on him? So remember, why did Dave say that they picked on him? If I remember right, Dave said other kids picked on him because they were uncomfortable themselves. I went back and I looked through chapter 1 to find where he says that. Well, he says that on page 7. Dave always told him kids did that because they were uncomfortable themselves. So I'm literally finding my answer straight from the book, 4th grade friends. Use it as a tool so you know you can get the right answers. Find it in the spot. Don't guess. All right, your portraits of your dream family. This is going to be my really quick sketch because it's hard to do this on a computer. Would be, we would have one. Ooh, this is a lot harder than I thought on a computer. All right, here's. Oop, yep, nope, we're going to change that. Go back and fix her face so she doesn't look sad. And then now we'd have just my quick sketch over here of the dream family. A description would be something like the dream family has a mom, dad, and son. Might have had even more details. Let's look back at chapter 1 and see if we can find some of those details where Dom's telling us about his dream family. There would always be a mother and a father, who we call mom and dad. Might have added some about the refrigerator. You might have drawn like the pantry in the background. And there would be brothers to play with, so we need to add in our brother over here, maybe. And they would have a pet. So maybe back here I have, this is my pet. This is the dog. I know I'm not the best artist on the computer, but it's kind of hard. So we have the dream family. Has a mom, dad, and 2 sons. Because he wants at least one brother to play around with. Then you should have described about the dream family. And yours should not be exactly like this. But you have 3 sentences. The dream family has everything I could want. I have a brother to play with, plenty of food to eat. I also have a mom and a dad who love me. So I have at least 3 sentences about the dream family. Right? What Dominic is thinking, I'm imagining I'm him. All right, so that was our homework. Now today we're going to read chapters 3, 4, and 5. And we're going to fill out this page together. And then you'll have your homework for 3, 4, and 5. All right, so let's find chapter 3 in our book and go ahead and get started. Chapter 3. My great-grandfather came from Italy. Dominic heard the words come tumbling out of his mouth. He took a gulp of air, anxious to see if anyone would object. No one did. With a wave of relief, he had remembered at the last minute how one of his foster fathers thought that the name Cantori was Italian. But without knowing his family history, he couldn't be sure. Dominic cringed now as he caught sight of Mr. Howard's wary look. There was something in the way his left eyebrow rose into a crooked arch over his eye. What do you think Mr. Howard's thinking during that time? The crooked arch. I think he's thinking, how do you know that? Because Mr. Howard knows he's in a foster family and has been moving around. He's probably like, why are you saying this? Do you really know that? Is it true? Dominic filled with embarrassment as he remembered that his teacher had talked to his caseworker. Of course Mr. Howard knew the truth about him. He knew that Dominic didn't know a thing about his family. Dominic swung around to look back at the ranger as she continued to talk. To celebrate the many immigrants who risked so much to come to our country, we have established a special memorial, she announced. It's called the American Immigrant Wall of Honor. Families and friends of immigrants may have a name placed on the wall for a donation. Do any of you know if you have relatives' names on the wall? Dominic watched uneasily as a number of hands went up, including Justin's and his friends. Dominic threw up his hand. He wanted so much to be like them, to have a family name up on that wall. Mr. Howard's eyebrow arched even higher, and the ranger beamed with delight. That's terrific, she cooed, because we'll all be going to see that wall after lunch. Then we can look for those names together. If everyone would follow me, the ranger continued, we'll move on to the baggage room area. Dominic straggled behind the group as they walked to the center of the room. Dominic could no longer hear what the ranger was saying. He was too distracted as he stared at the back of Mr. Howard's head. He worried about going to the wall and about how embarrassed he'd be when his classmates discovered that his family name wasn't there. Why did I have to tell such a big, dumb lie? Dominic thought. If only it would all go away. Dominic couldn't stop worrying as the group slowly made its way around the museum's first floor. He had hardly noticed the large black and white photographs of immigrants that hung on the walls. The sights and sounds of the second floor were lost on him as well. He was unable to concentrate on anything. Even so, the tour went on. The telephone receivers you see in the display in front of you are equipped with tape voices of real immigrants telling their stories, the ranger explained. Dominic thought of his own story and how he would give anything to change it. He followed the others and mechanically picked up a receiver and listened. The voice of an old Polish woman croaked in his ear. She talked about how dangerous escaping from her country had been. And as she told of the rough, stormy seas and the bad food on the ship, Dominic thought about the ferry ride home. He imagined the jeers and ridicule that would be heaped on him, and how his favorite part of the trip, the boat ride past the Statue of Liberty, would be ruined. All the fifth graders would know the truth about his family, and that he was a liar. All right, folks, we're going to the third floor, Mr. Howard called. Line up at the escalator and watch your step. Dominic hung up the receiver and watched as the excited huddle of fifth graders rushed to get in line. He imagined himself standing conspicuously alone. Then the moment Dominic had been dreading would finally arrive. Mr. Howard would announce that it was time to see the wall, the dreaded wall. As Dominic followed his class to the line by the escalator, he ducked behind one of the display cases and reemerged in the middle of a group of Japanese tourists who were waiting at the down escalator. He moved along, hidden in the large crowd, and kept his head low as he rode back to the first floor. Once there, Dominic broke away from the crowd and ran to the end of the hall. He saw an open door and stepped inside. He smiled at the sight of all the brooms, mops, and bottles of cleaners that filled the little closet. Then he reached for a big flashlight that was sitting on a shelf. He clicked it on, closed the door behind him. In the glow of the flashlight, Dominic cleared a space in a back corner of the closet, behind some big canvas tarps that were hanging from hooks. When he was sure that he was safely hidden away, Dominic sank down to the floor and took off his sneakers and socks. He turned the flashlight off and wiggled his toes with relief. He welcomed the dark, like a cool, protective black blanket. Now that he was hidden away from all of them, he could relax. With a yawn, he laid his head back against the wall and began to wonder what he should do next. But he was too tired to think. All he knew was that he needed to get away. Dominic yawned again. The strain of the day's excitement was suddenly catching up with him. He found himself struggling to keep his eyes open, but the temptation to give in to the drowsy feeling of sleep was too much for him. Dominic's head drooped onto his chest as he closed his eyes. I'll take a little rest, he thought. just for a few minutes. Then he thought nothing at all. Why did Dominic leave the class? I think, he was so embarrassed. Remember the dreaded wall was coming up, and he's like, I can't face that wall. They're going to know I'm a liar. Would you have done the same as Dominic? Say you did tell the lie. Would you have ran away? I don't know. I like to think I wouldn't, but I probably would because I'd be so scared. All right, let's read chapter 4. We got 2 more chapters for today. His neck ached. That was the first thing Dominic noticed when he woke. He lifted his head from his chest. That's when he noticed the second thing, the darkness. Where am I? He wondered. He stretched out one leg and was startled by a loud bang as his bare foot knocked against a bucket. The noise and the strong odor of disinfectant suddenly brought the memory of the whole dreadful day rushing back to him. Dominic reached down into his lap and turned on the flashlight. I wonder if they've gone to the wall yet, he whispered, poking his head out from behind the tarp. He pictured his classmates' accusing faces as they searched for his great-grandfather's name, a name he was certain they'd never find. I can't go back with them, and I can't go back to that school, he said grimly. In the glow of the flashlight, Dominic wondered what he ought to do next. Then he thought of Dave Santos, his caseworker. Dave had promised to find him a new family. Maybe Dave could find him one today. And a new school to go with it, he thought. All I have to do is call Dave. Dominic decided. Then he remembered that he only had his lucky Indian head nickel in his pocket, which wasn't enough money for the phone. That's all right, Dominic said to himself with a shrug. I don't need Dave anyway. I can hop a ferry. His face brightened at this notion, although he didn't take the time to think past what he would do after the ferry ride. It was enough to have a plan that took him that far. He stood up and made his way across the closet. That's funny, he thought as he opened the door a crack. It's so dark. He pushed it open a little further. The bright lights that had been there before had been dimmed. Dominic stepped out of the closet and into the museum. He flicked on the flashlight and took a step to the right. Flashing his light across the huge exhibit hall, he recognized the silver escalator. Gleaming in the darkness, it sat silently, moving neither up nor down. And where were all the people? What's going on? Dominic thought nervously, taking a few steps forward. By the time he reached the darkened display cases, Dominic's nervousness had turned to fear. There was definitely something wrong, dreadfully wrong. It was all too still, too quiet. Where was everyone? And what had happened to the lights? Using his flashlight to guide him, Dominic slowly found his way to the entrance doors. He tried the handles, but they were locked. He pressed his face against the glass. To his astonishment, he saw lights twinkling in the distance as boats bobbed up and down over the black waters of the harbor. So what's happened? It's now nighttime, right? The black waters, everything's dark. It's the end of the day. He slept through the rest of the day. Oh no! Dominic gasped when he realized it was night. He pushed open the heavy door, but it wouldn't budge. He tried opening all the doors again, but they were locked fast. I must have slept for hours, he thought. Help! He shouted at the top of his lungs, hoping someone would hear, but his shout only echoed into the eerie stillness. As he bounced his flashlight's beam from one wall to the next, Dominic thought about his classmates and Mr. Howard, his teacher. Had they gone back to the school without him? Hadn't anyone missed him? Whether anyone missed him or not, it didn't matter much now, Dominic realized. What mattered was it was dark, and he was all alone and hungry and trapped in this museum until morning. What am I supposed to do here all night? He thought. Is anybody here? He called out. There's got to be someone else here. Hey, he shouted. Can you hear me? Help! As he made his way across the room, his shouts for help became more and more desperate. He called on anybody he could think of to help. Hey, Mr. Night Watchman, help! Hey, Dave, help! Hey, Mr. Howard, help! Hey, Mr. President, help! Help! Hey, anybody, help! And finally, when he was sure there was no one around who could hear him, Dominic cried aloud, I'm scared. I'm really scared. What do you think Dominic's going to do next? Maybe keep searching the museum. That's what I would want to do. I'd want to keep searching to try and find someone. There's got to be somebody there. Like you said, security guy, night watchman. Somebody's got to be there. All right, our last chapter for today, chapter 5. After trying everything he could think of to get out of the museum, Dominic walked up the still escalator steps to the second floor. He shone his light up to a huge black and white photograph of an immigrant family that hung on the wall. Dominic stopped to read the words below it. An Irish family arriving at Ellis Island, 1911, was all the caption said. Dominic studied the picture. There was a mother, a father, and 9 children. He counted them. To his surprise, he realized that they were all boys. At least 8 of them were. He wasn't sure about the baby in the mother's arms. Even so, 8 brothers. He whistled aloud. What do you think's going through Dominic's head right here? Holy smokes, 8 brothers? Imagine how fun that would be, instead of being all by himself. I think he's a little envious of this family, too. Dominic had always dreamed of having a brother, but having 8 would be like winning the lottery. He stared up at the photograph and imagined himself standing in the long line of fair-haired boys. Soon Dominic walked from photo to photo, trying on one family after another. What do you think that means? Trying on one family after another. We see, like, how would I fit in this family? Ooh, what about this family over here? What about this one? So he's walking around and he's imagining himself joining these families. He saw himself surrounded with Chinese brothers and sisters in one picture, leaning against a tall Russian father in another, and in the arms of a smiling gypsy mother in yet another. He spent a long time roaming the hallways and rooms, seeking out faces, imagining himself happily fitting in, a single spoke in a large wheel of a real family. His favorite picture was of an Italian family. There was a boy with a cap on his head and a sack over his shoulder. Besides the boy stood a little girl and a mother with a baby in her arms. Dominic thought the boy looked like him with his dark hair and eyes. He spent a long time in front of this picture, not only imagining himself a part of this family, but imagining that this boy was somehow really his Italian ancestor. He realized this was a 1 in a million chance, but he couldn't stop thinking, what if? After Dominic had stared at the picture for a long time, he decided to go upstairs to the 3rd floor and see what there might be to do up there. But as he started to climb the now motionless escalator, a low mechanical groan suddenly arose from the silent steps, and he jumped off. Then, just as suddenly as it had started up, the noise stopped. Everything was quiet again, deadly quiet, that chilled Dominic to the bone. Dazed with fear, he stumbled about the room and bumped into a display case, which caused him to scream out loud. The unexpected noise had shaken his nerves so badly that his teeth had begun to chatter. What was going on? He wondered. Was someone there? Were they watching him and trying to frighten him? Crouching under a display stand of telephones, Dominic squeezed his eyes shut and willed his teeth to stop chattering. He sat perfectly still, like a hunted animal, hiding, waiting, and listening. But the low hum of the air conditioning was the only sound to fill the room. Dominic stayed that way for what seemed like hours, frozen with fear, until he felt his legs begin to cramp. Slowly, cautiously, he moved out from under the table and finally stood up. Then, without thinking, he reached out and picked up one of the telephone receivers on the display in front of him. An old Norwegian man talked about his homeland. Dominic was filled with such relief that he let out a loud sigh. It was the first human voice he had heard all night, and even though he knew it was only a tape, the sound of the old man was somehow comforting. As he went from one telephone to another, Dominic's fears slipped away, and he began to pretend that he was actually having conversations with the voices. They were mostly old people, grandmothers and grandfathers, he guessed. He pretended they were his. Soon he began to feel less lonely. But the voices never answered him, and after a while he began to long to talk to someone real, someone who would answer his questions and listen to what he had to say, like a real grandmother or grandfather would have. Dominic's hand reached for the last phone on the stand when the flashlight went dead. Suddenly, he was in total darkness. Frantically, he tapped the flashlight against the table and turned the switch on and off, but it was no use. It wouldn't light up. He dropped it down onto the display stand. Desperately frightened, Dominic stood trembling in the blackness. His hands searched under his t-shirt until his fingers felt the familiar smooth curves of his lucky key. What was he supposed to do now? Where could he go? What if someone was out there watching him, waiting for him? Dominic searched back down for the useless flashlight, thinking to carry it as a weapon if he had to, but his hand fell over the phone receiver instead. It was the last phone on the stand, the one he was about to pick up before the flashlight died. He brought the receiver to his ear and heard a kindly old voice begin to speak. I came to America when I was a boy of 11 years old. I'm all alone, Dominic blurted out, and nobody cares. Nobody even came to look for me. In Italy, we had very little, yet we had so much. I don't know what to do. Dominic's voice was choked with sobs. The flashlight's broken and it's so dark. I'm afraid. My brothers and I all shared one pair of shoes. We had to take turns wearing them. Mr. Howard forgot me, and maybe my foster family forgot me too. In Italy, we had a goat. Oh, please, it's so dark. I'm so afraid. Dominic pleaded. Please listen to me. There was a long pause on the other end. Then, as he stood all alone in the darkness, Dominic Cantori heard the old voice whisper, Yes, little one, I am listening. Who do you think is talking to him there? Could it be the person on the phone? It's just recording, so isn't it? Maybe somebody else is there. Maybe it is the phone. I don't know. We'll find out next time when we start with chapter 6. All right, let's take a look. We're going to finish the simile that was found in chapter 3. So let's find chapter 3 in our books. Alright, that's chapter 4. Alright, chapter 3. He welcomed the dark like... Let's look through and see if we can find that simile. Well, on the bottom of page 14, I found it. Did you find it? Alright, bottom of page 14. He welcomed the dark like a cool, protective, black blanket. Ooh, so remember, he feels like a cool, protective black blanket. You're going to make up your own simile down here. Maybe I'm going to keep my beginning part. He welcomed the dark like... What would I imagine the dark like? Like a soft, welcoming bed. Right? Like I'm finally relaxed, kind of like a protective black blanket, like a soft, welcoming bed. I'm comparing those two different things using that word like or as. All right. This part of our activity is more for you. Okay, so text to self, text to world, and text to text. We talked about these different kind of connections before. So think through, is there anything in this story that we've read so far, especially chapters 3, 4, and 5, where Dominic is in the museum, that you can relate with? Maybe, I'm thinking back, one time I got lost in Target and felt so alone. Time I got lost and I felt so alone. Text to world, is there Are there people in the story who remind you of people you know? Well, are things happening in the story that are like things going on around me, in my family, among my school friends and neighbors, and what I learned from the news? So maybe I'm thinking about people immigrate still to this day. We talked a lot about people who are immigrating still and coming to America. Or text to text. Is there something in this story that's like another story you read? You know what? Dominic reminds me of oh my goodness, I can't think of his name from Restart. I just had it. Of Chase. It's a little. He doesn't remember his family either. Dominic doesn't know it, but Chase doesn't really remember his. So I kind of have that similarity that I'm thinking about. Now I want you to try and make 3 connections, 1 for each category. If you come up with 2 for at least, but at least 1 would be fabulous. All right, then I want you to pause the video after I give you these directions. I want you to find words describing that Italian portrait family. So on page 21, in the middle of 21, his favorite picture was of an Italian family. There was a boy with a cap on his head and a sack over his shoulder. Beside the boy stood a little girl and a mother with a baby in her arms. Dominic thought the boy looked like him with his dark hair and eyes. So drawing your portrait of that family there, page 21 will help you. Pause the video while you work on that. All right, then the last part, write a phone description that would best represent one of your family members. So imagine your family member, you're picking up the phone and they're describing your family member. Like mine might say something about, my sister is tall with big hands, much bigger than mine. She has long brown curly hair compared to my short to straight brown hair. Describing your family members, any family member you want. All right, for your friends, remember, pause the video if you need more work time or rewind if you missed a direction. Then your last part is your homework for tonight. Okay, I know this seems like a lot. Remember, it tells you which chapter you can look through and find them in. Okay, and same thing, answering complete sentences, okay? So just 12 questions there, okay? Let me know if you have questions. Otherwise, I will talk to you.